All right, Coach Simcoe. Nice little session. 45-minute, hour and 15-minute scrap.
Yep.
Good drill. Drilling. How important is drilling?
Drilling, I think, is the key to success in wrestling, man. You know, wrestling's one of those sports, man. Dustin, our GA, said it best. He said, people talk about, practice makes perfect, but perfect practice makes perfect, right? So you got to be able to do those techniques when you're tired. Got to win the third period. Got to win the first period, too, right? So don't do that if you don't have the technique down.
You talking about it, your system is largely Burnett and Jordan.
Yep.
Right? It's like repetition, same stuff every day, and it builds muscle memory.
For sure.
Right? Like you're saying. But how important is consistency?
I think it's one of the most important things you can do. Whether you're talking about your micro practice where you're doing your individual stuff or you're talking about practice itself, I think the more you put yourself in a situation, the more familiar you are with it, right? So the consistency of a practice also is the consistency of a match, right? So if I'm constantly every day working on defending a high crotch, when I get hit with a high crotch in a match, I'm not going to panic.
The special day for you guys, monumental day. Your donors came together, president of the university, your athletic director, and just supporters in general. You open this beautiful facility as we see the girls, warming up behind you.
Yeah.
And I'll tell you what, man, it's one of the best standalone facilities in the country. It's one of the only standalone facilities in the country, right?
Yep.
You guys, Cornell, Michigan, Ohio State. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's about Wabash College shares one with, I think tennis maybe, but
right.
It's basically standalone wrestling. But looking at that, knowing that you're in that crowd, that's huge, right?
Yeah, it's kind of been a dream of mine. I think, like Zeb, you and I have talked about this a few times, right? The excuse me, the growth in Division II is incredible. Not alone in Division II, but NAIA and Division III, along with the club stuff. I think you're going to start seeing more Division II schools kind of go this route, just simply because, we're producing quality wrestlers, and having the standalone facility is incredible. Not having to deal with anybody else's schedule, just ours. Couldn't ask for much better, man.
We see the women practicing behind you. They're warming up right now. I'm actually pretty stoked. But, how huge is that for the growth for your administration to be like, of course we want a standalone facility, right?
Right.
How huge is, adding a women's program, being the first in the state of Ohio to do that?
I've had this dream for a while, probably about 9 years ago. I went and watched, we were at National Duels when I was at my previous institution. And I watched women's wrestling, collegiate wrestling for the first time. Blew my mind. Wrestling's always fighting for respect. They put more poker on ESPN than they do wrestling, right?
Don't even get me started, right? But yeah, go ahead.
But, wrestling's always fighting for time, respect. And I watched women's wrestling, and, they're fighting for respect, not only for wrestling, but for women as well, right? So it was just very empowering to watch. And, I've been trying to push this. It was about 5 years ago. I pitched it the first time, and we were in the midst of some changes in our presidency here. So, when we had the money in place and the donors in place for this facility, the timing was perfect.
I look at you and you're intense. You're high intense. You burn it high octane. There's no question about it. But what do you think you want to mentor these guys and these girls to do? You're ultimately responsible for both programs.
Yeah. So
what's that role like? What's that like?
I'm still figuring it out too, Zeb. To be honest, it's kind of cool, right? I got a new title. I'm the director of wrestling operations now. So I oversee both programs. I'm Brittany's direct report, or Coach Gadd. Sorry, I got to quit calling her Brittany all the time. It's very intriguing because I get to deal with these young ladies now too, right? And it's it's back to that fighting for respect of wrestling and women everywhere, right? So it's a whole different dynamic, and my goal is that we get these guys and these girls out. And, they go back in the world and they get their clubs going, and they're giving back, and that's kind of what it's all about. Wrestling's not really a sport of getting paid, so to speak. For me, it's like a pay it forward, right? I heard that from a guy back in high school, and that's really what I'm trying to do.
The thing I like about you is you keep talking about getting respect. You're someone who sometimes you don't win those recruiting battles, and guys go to, they get to Virginia Tech, Pitt,
Yep.
Michigan, Ohio State, right? Kent State, whatever.
Yep.
And it's because everybody thinks they're a D1 guy.
Mm-hmm.
You got a total chip on your shoulder. I love it.
All the time.
Totally. And there's no question about it. But, I think that's what really, is what fuels the fire for you, being the underdog.
Absolutely.
Underdog in high school.
Yep.
Underdog in college.
Yep.
Underdog as a college coach. How much do you embrace that underdog role, and how much of that chip on your shoulder has, you've carried it with you, and it's really driven you and taken you great places. But
yeah.
How much do you embrace that?
I absolutely love it. Like you said, I mean, you hit the nail on the head. I was a Division III guy in high school, right? So everybody talked about how D2 and D1 were better, and so that always fueled me in high school, right? And then when I was making my college choices, I was recruited by some bigger schools, but for me, it personally didn't fit, right? I knew that if I ended up at a big college, I wasn't going to make good choices, right? So I met Sean over at Finley, Sean Nelson. Great guy, one of my best friends to this day, and the small school fit me, and that chip on my shoulder, it carried over to college. I loved wrestling the Ohio State singlets. I loved wrestling, Michigan State. I mean, one of the best wins I had. It was kind of funny. I wrestled Andy Simmons at the MSU Open, and I beat him. And you would have thought it was like a shock to the world. To me, it was I was supposed to. You know what I mean? I never looked at it that I was supposed to lose to somebody because of their singlet. You know what I mean?
Okay. I don't know if you know this. I'm sure you know this, but like Finley has one scholarship. Finley has. How did that guy do that? That's
Sean's
incredible. How much of a mentor has Sean Nelson been for you? Like,
incredible.
I mean, it's unreal. Like,
yep.
How have they done, and how are they consistently top 15, 10 team?
Yeah,
are you not amazed as well, or am I?
I am. No, I am. Sean, speaking on him is like speaking on a legend. You know what I mean? Sean Nelson, he was a 3-time state champ in high school, All-American at Penn State. I was fortunate enough to wrestle for him, and I've taken a lot of his philosophies and a lot of his style, to my own program. Tony Garrett is now the head coach over at Defiance, wrestled for Coach Nelson. Sean's just a very influential man. I mean, he finds a way to get it done. He sells himself and the program, and we all bought in, and that's the big thing. When you have buy-in from your athletes, it's kind of easy to produce results sometimes. You know what I mean?
It seems like it's easy for you to get buy-in. I think you're like you're a coach's coach. You're a kid's coach. I like just watching you here today, talking to other people about you. Where does that come from?
Some me, some influence from other people. I was blessed to always have very good coaches in my life. My high school coach, and he, Coach Bill Perry's his name. He lives in Texas now, retired and doing his thing. But he was always there for me, whether it was 2 o'clock in the morning. Because I couldn't sleep, and I'd call him, he'd answer the phone, and he was always there. And then I got to college, I had Coach Nelson, and, I had our assistants, Bubba Taylor and Jared Swint. Those guys were huge influences in my life. I had great GAs, and my dad's always been a people person, right? My dad he never wrestled, got me into it, got me around great people like the Jordans. I spent a lot of time down at their camps, and just learned what wrestling can do for people.
All right. What do you ultimately want this community to get out of what you've done? You trained the law enforcement,
right?
You're telling the story today about how 3 of them had to wrestle you down. You're like a scrappy worming out of stuff. I love it. You do the youth. I asked you how you have time to do anything. I was like, how do you have time to do anything? In our phone conversation, I'm like, dude, you're nuts, right?
Right.
Why is it so important to get back to your community and? Why you don't need to help the law enforcement, man? You don't need to do that. Why do you do stuff like that?
To me, I mean that's a very loaded question, right? I believe I was a CJ major. I was very close to becoming a police officer myself. And I feel like everybody needs the best tools possible, right? If a situation can be solved non-violently, it should be, right? But everybody out there knows how to do a little something, right? Everybody wants to be an MMA fighter or something, so. Those guys, those police officers are out there. They're risking their lives every day. They just want to make it home. So I feel I owe it to them. I owe it to my community to try to help in any way I can with that.
About the youth, that's hard,
youth,
man. That's
that's
really hard.
That's where it's at. And I know it's growing, and I know there's people talking about it, but the pro wrestling circuit, right? I mean, let's be honest, the WWE's not us. Some of us have crossed over, right? But the WWE's not us. For us, if you're not making the Olympic team or the world team, it's kind of it after college. So I believe one of the most important things you can do is give back to kids, right? And it's kind of like that idea, like I said, pay it forward. People did that for me. I had guys that were 60 years old coming back to work with me. Mike Metzger, I'm sure he'll watch this video and probably put a comment on it and call me a name or something. But he used to come back and tease me about kicking my butt and taking me out on his Golden Buckeye card, right? That's what it's about. It's always about giving back. And some of these kids they don't have anything else. So it's about giving them a purpose and a path and something to believe in.
Okay, you and I got to go do some tours. We got to talk about a couple other things. You got anything else for me right now?
Not off the top of my head, man.
I love it.
Not off the top of my head.
Let's go do some tours and talk about some other stuff. Thanks for the time.
Absolutely.
Go Dragons.
Absolutely.
And we're
Go
not done yet,
Dragons.
all right?
Yep.